Good morning and welcome to our final webinar for this June. My name is Antea and I am the Horizon 2020 NCP coordinator. And today we'll be talking about project management in Horizon 2020. Just a few housekeeping rules before we start off. May I remind you that today's session is also being recorded as with previous sessions. And all these recordings are now available on the Malta Council for Science and Technology website. And also we have now set up a YouTube channel. So you can access all these webinars and also some other Horizon 2020 related videos, which you can access. Of course, we will be sending you the links to these and today's presentation after the session. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter pages and join our newsletter to receive updated material from Horizon 2020 and also the new framework program Horizon Europe. May I kindly remind you to please keep your microphones muted for the whole session and your cameras switched off. But just to give you the heads up, we will be having a Kahoot game later on the session today. So if you can have your mobile phones ready for later, you can join us in this short quiz, which we have prepared for you. If you have any questions during the session, you can make use of the chat box available, and we will be addressing these questions at the end of the session. So, running a Horizon 2020 project, what are the key challenges which you encounter when you are running a Horizon 2020 project, and why is this important? First of all, you have to remember that project administration and project management is a shared responsibility with your administration department. The project is not just the responsibility of the researchers involved in carrying out the research. So the whole entity has to be involved. After all, this is your entity, is the legal entity being represented in this project. So your financial and administration departments are equally important here. Reporting requirements are not just technical reporting, and in many cases, the researcher is responsible for the technical input, but there is also financial content which you have to provide when you come to reporting. And this, of course, this information has to be provided by your financial unit. And for example, this will include your personnel rate. This has to be provided by your financial unit, so you can then include this in your reporting. Of course, some researchers may find this administration requirements very rigid and cumbersome, but keep in mind that these are public funds which we are dealing with, so the budget spent in your project has to be accounted for. Moreover, the grant which was given to you is based on your project plan. So this has been proposed in your proposal, and you have to adhere to the plan which you have provided. Any changes any changes to the grant agreement, then you will have to do an amendment. But my colleague Lily will also be speaking about this later on in the presentation. May I also remind you that our NCP services do not stop just when you are applying for the grant. We can also offer our assistance here. So if you have any queries when you are running a project, you can always come to your national contact point for any assistance. So, grant preparation process. After the call deadline, after you submit your proposal by the stipulated deadline, the Commission has 5 months to carry out the evaluation of your proposal. And this is done by normally engaging independent evaluators. After the 5 months, then you will be notified whether your proposal is successful and whether you will be receiving funding. And this will give you then 3 months to sign the grant agreement. Just keep in mind that the grant preparation, everything is now done online through the funding and tenders portal. So if this is your first project, you should have received a temporary PIC, for example, to apply for your proposal. And now, if your proposal is selected for funding, you will have to verify the legal status of your organization. So if, for example, you are an SME, you will be required to submit legal documents which have established your company. And just to give you the heads up, this procedure is only required to be done once. And once your PIC number is verified, you will not be required to do this again for future projects. Then the grant agreement is signed this is signed by the coordinator, and then the Commission will sign the grant agreement. Then at this stage, the grant can enter into force. In some instances, the Commission may require that the beneficiary sign a consortium agreement before the Commission actually signs the grant agreement. Consortium agreements are, of course, important to avoid any issues that might crop up during the running of the project. Then, once the Commission signs the grant agreement, the beneficiaries have to sign the accession to the grant agreement before they can receive any funding from the coordinator. So, in summary, as I mentioned, during the grant preparation phase, you will be assigned a project officer, which will be your contact person with the Commission, and any queries and issues are dealt directly with the project officer. Your grant agreement is made up of some sections. So you have the core grant agreement, then you have, which is the usual grant agreement. There are, of course, different types of grant agreements depending on the type of actions, whether you are signing a CSA, a research and innovation action, an innovation action. I mean, these are types depending on the action which you are being involved in. Then Annex 1 is the same proposal which you have submitted, and the Annex 2 is the budget of your proposal. Annex 3 is normally the accession to the grant agreement of the beneficiaries, and then of course there are other annexes related to your proposal. The key roles here, you have a coordinator, of course, and you can either be a coordinator and a beneficiary. What is the difference between the two? Of course, the coordinator is the main person responsible for the project. So he is the key contact point between the Commission and the beneficiary. At proposal stage, the coordinator is responsible to collect all the information from the partners and submit the full proposal. And then, once the grant agreement is signed, the coordinator is the main contact point responsible for the project. So he or she is the intermediary between the Commission and the beneficiary. The coordinator is also the person who will receive your reporting if you are a beneficiary. So the beneficiaries, they prepare the report and send them to the coordinator. The coordinator then is, of course, responsible to review these reports before then the coordinator submits them to the Commission. Moreover, the payments of the grant agreement are made from the Commission to the coordinator. The beneficiaries do not receive directly the grant from the Commission, but they receive the grant from the coordinator. Of course, then the coordinator is responsible to give out this payment to the beneficiaries without any justified delay. On the other hand, the beneficiary, their role is to carry out the tasks which they have been assigned in the project, and as I mentioned, they have to report to the coordinator. Also, informing the coordinator of any issues affecting the project. And of course, the beneficiary is responsible to make their own financial reporting and submit them to the coordinator. Then, of course, there is the LEAR. This is the LEAR is the legal entity appointed representative, and this is per entity, not per project. So each entity which has a verified PIC number has a layer in place. And this is the main contact between the Commission and the legal entity to inform the Commission of any changes in the status of the legal data and status of the entity. The LIR is also responsible to inform via the Funding and Tenders portal the Commission about the legal signatories of the organization, and they nominate also the financial signatories for each grant which the entity has been approved of. Payments. There are three types of payments. So there is the pre-financing. There is one or more interim payment depending on the duration of the grant agreement. And then the final payment is the payment of the balance. As I mentioned earlier, the payments are made to the coordinator, and then the coordinator is responsible to distribute this payment to the other partners. This is some information which I have just already mentioned. The coordinator has to distribute the payment to the beneficiary without unjustified delay, and he or she may also be required to inform the Commission about the distribution of the payment. Of course, the distribution which was made to the beneficiary. So if the Commission does not pay within the deadline, then the beneficiaries the coordinator and the beneficiaries can be entitled to a late payment interest. But normally all payments are done in time. So the pre-financing, when is this paid? This is paid within 30 days from the signature of the grant agreement, or 10 days before the starting date, whichever is the latest. Normally, how much is paid? Normally, the procedure is that you have the grant agreement, you divide it by the number of the reporting periods established in the grant agreement, and you pay the first payment. Of course, from this, you have to deduct 5% of the grant, which will go to the guarantee fund. But keep in mind that this, even the payment, if the payment has been made, this still remains the property of the EU until the final payment of the payment of the balance. So this, until all the work has been carried out, this grant is still the property of the EU. Just to give you an example here, so let's say we have a grant of 1 million euros. Here the funding rate is 100%, and we have 3 reporting periods for this project. So 5% would be 50,000 euros. This will be the guarantee fund. So the 1 million euros divided by 3, which comes to 233,000. And this will be your pre-financing. But of course, from this, you have to deduct the 50,000 of the guarantee fund. So here, in this example, the pre-financing will amount to 283,000 euros. Then we have the interim payments. The interim payments take place after each reporting period. So you will receive this payment 90 days from after you submit the periodic reports, because of course in these 90 days the Commission has to verify that the reporting was done correctly, that the reporting is done in time, and that everything, all the information required is submitted. And you will receive, of course, the payment, the eligible payment, depending on the reporting which you have carried out. However, you will not receive more than 90% of the maximum grant during any interim payment. And as I mentioned, this is based on the eligible costs which have been submitted in your reporting. Any costs which are not eligible will be rejected, and they will not be taken into account in this payment. Then the final payment is the payment of the balance, And this is the payment is made within 90 days from reception of the final reporting. And here, the Commission will reimburse all the remaining eligible costs which have been incurred. And of course, it will include the guarantee fund. That money is then released if, of course, everything is done properly. So in this case, of the final balance, if the payment is less than the final grant amount, there of course will be payment. However, if you have incurred less costs than what you have already received, then there can be a recovery, and you will have to pay back the Commission the money which you did not spend. So what if the consortium is late and no reports are submitted on time? The Commission will, of course, send you a reminder. The payment deadline is then suspended, and the Commission also has the right to terminate the grant if the reports are not submitted on time. But what happens if only one beneficiary is late? This, of course, will not hold up the whole consortium, and the coordinator may decide to submit the reports without that beneficiary if this one beneficiary is late. And in this case, the beneficiary's cost will be considered as zero, so no reporting for that period. The beneficiary can have the chance to declare their costs in the next reporting period. Why is reporting important? Of course, here you will have to check the progress of your project against the work plan. As I mentioned earlier, your grant depends on the work plan which you have submitted. So, of course, you have to check the progress of your work, to check the adequacy of the resources used, eligibility, of course, of costs. And you will also be required to gather such information like in publications, patents, and other information which will be required when you are submitting this information. And of course, beneficiaries have to be paid for the work which they have carried out. This continuous reporting is also an important feature of the funding and tenders portal, because this is activated at the beginning of the project. It's activated by the coordinator, and here you have the chance to submit any deliverables and inform about any progress which you have achieved in your milestones, and this is done throughout the process of the project. So you will not have to wait for any reporting deadline to submit such report, but this can be done anytime during the duration of the project. I would like now to introduce, of course, you know her from previous webinars, my colleague Lily, and she will take on the presentation from here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lily, and yes, you probably know me from before. I'm the national contact point for the Marie Skłodowska Reactions, European Research Council, and Future and Emerging Technologies. Today, I'll talk to you about the reporting, the amendments, audits, and the documents that one needs to keep in case if audit occurs. So the coordinator and the beneficiaries are required to submit periodic reports during the project duration and a final report at the end of the project. They both consist, the final report and the periodic report, they both consist of a technical report and a financial report. Just a second, please. Give me a second, just I'll be trying to make the screen full. So Sorry about that. It got stuck like. Is now better?
Lily, the screen is not being shown at the moment. You have to reactivate it.
It's very strange because on my screen it shows.
It might be because you're using two screens.
No, I'm using only one. Give me a second. Okay, now I think it's going to happen. Okay, so now it should be okay. Sorry about that.
Okay, Lily, okay.
So what I was saying is that both the final report and the periodic report consist of technical report and a financial report. So the periodic technical report contains explanation of the work, overview of the progress, and summary for publications. As well, you will find a small questionnaire that you have to reply. The periodic financial report then contains the individual financial statement, an explanation on the use of the resources, and a periodic summary financial statement. And this is for each one of the beneficiaries. And as well, this represents also the request for the interim payment. The periodic report must be submitted within 60 days after the end of the reporting period, and it's the responsibility of the coordinator to submit this report. This deadline of the 60 days is for the coordinator. Thus, the coordinator will give a shorter deadline for all the beneficiaries. Usually, what they do is that they give a 30 days deadline, so that the coordinator will be able then to combine all the reports and submit the report in time within the 60 days deadline. So the number of periodic reports depends on the duration of the project. Typically, for example, if you have a project of 36 months, then you will have only one periodic report at around the month of 18. And then you will also have, of course, the final report at the end. So the final technical report is a publishable summary of the entire project. The information that needs to be included is an overview of the results and their exploitation and dissemination, conclusions on the project, and the socio-economic impact of the project. And the final financial report is the final summary financial statement that is automatically created by the system. It is consolidating the data from all individual financial statements for all beneficiaries and linked parties, if they are such linked parties, linked third parties taking part in the project, and also it consolidates all the reporting periods. That also constitutes the request for payment of the balance. And once again, it is the responsibility of the coordinator to submit the final report within 60 days after the end of the reporting period. The technical reports consist of Part A and Part B. Part A consists of structured tables from the grant management system, from the funding and tenders portal, such as the summary for publication, web-based tables covering information about the different work packages, the different deliverables, milestones, and again, a small questionnaire. And the Part B is a free text Word document where all beneficiaries need to include explanations of the work carried out, an overview of the progress towards the project objectives, and justify if there are any differences between the work that was expected and the one that is outlined in Annex 1 and the work that was actually carried out. If there are any difference, here is the section where one should explain why these differences occurred. The financial report consists of structured forms from the grant management system, and this includes the individual's financial statement for each beneficiary, and again, if there are any linked third parties, also their financial statements, explanation of the use of resources and information on subcontracting and in-kind contributions, if such costs were performed, and periodic summary financial statement, including the request for interim payment. Please note that at the end, if your eligible costs are 325,000 or more, you will be requested to submit a certificate on the financial statement. This is for each one of the beneficiaries. And the certificate must be provided by an external auditor, not someone in-house. There are a few points that you need to keep in mind in relation to the financial reporting. For example, you must declare costs based on the actual amounts spent, not estimates. You must demonstrate the best value in purchasing and subcontracting. So this may be request for quotations or tenders. It really depends on the amounts and depends on the national rules and also your internal procedures. You cannot subcontract a project partner. If you are about to subcontract additional entity, this should be not part of the consortium, this entity. And of course, you cannot charge costs that were incurred before the start of the project. Only the costs that were incurred once the official date, starting date of the project will be eligible. It's important to keep in mind that staff costs relate only to the staff that is actually employed by the entity, and not by any other people that might have helped or worked on the project but do not have contracts in your entity. If you have equipment costs, you must note that the equipment is charged based on depreciation costs. And although it is not a requirement, it is recommended to keep the time spent on the project on timesheets. So amendments, yes, amendments can happen, and Article 55 of the Model Grant Agreement allows for an official amendment to happen. Amendments actually happen quite often in projects, although you might not expect and not envisage to have amendments at the beginning, especially if the project is long, with long duration, let's say above 2 years. It's very often that amendments can occur. And when do you need to request the official amendment? If, for example, a beneficiary drops out, there is a termination of one of the beneficiaries, or if you are adding a new beneficiary, or if you are there is a change in the beneficiary, let's say the entity is changing its status or its name, also it will be required to ask for official amendment. And it's the same thing also for the linked third parties. If you remove or add a linked third party, an official amendment will be needed. An amendment is also needed, of course, if the coordinator changes, but even if the bank account of the coordinator changes. And of course, if you see any substantial differences in Annex 1, such as the title, the starting date, the duration, the progress reports, any substantial differences that were written in Annex 1 and you are thinking that there will be change, you should request first the amendment before actually the change occurs. And also, if there's substantial budget changes, for small budget changes, budget shifts, you don't need an amendment, but for substantial budget changes, you will need. You have to always check with your project officer if you will need an amendment. So now, checks, reviews, and audits. Yes, the Commission may check the proper implementation of the action, including assessing the deliverables and the reports. For example, after receiving the reports, the Commission checks the different documents for consistencies with the description and the work plan. Also, the Commission regularly performs double funding checks. The Commission may also carry out reviews on the proper implementation of the action. Reviews normally refer mainly to the technical implementation of the project, but may also cover financial and budgetary aspects. Reviews may be started up to 2 years after the payment of the balance and may include on-the-spot visits, on-the-spot checks. In case of fraud suspicion, the European Anti-Fraud Office, OLAF, may conduct investigations too. And in addition, it does happen often that the European Commission may order an audit of your Horizon 2020 grant, and this can happen at any time and up to 2 years after the final payment. So these are some of the documents that you need to keep in case of an audit. When it comes to personnel costs, we recommend that you keep dated and signed timesheets, the original and signed contracts of the persons that worked on the project or are working on the project, pay slips, and any proof of payment of the salaries, such as bank transfers or checks. When it comes to other direct costs and subcontracting, one needs to keep as part of the documents filed the quotations and other offers that maybe the entity received, tender documents if you have launched tenders, invoices, proof of payments, again, bank transfers, checks. Of course, there are always the travel expenses in the project. You need to keep the boarding passes, the actual tickets, any proof that you have actually attended this meeting abroad. When you organize meetings as well, you have to, like for example, conferences or workshops and so on as part of the project. Apart from the agenda, you also have to keep the signed attendance list proving who has attended the event. Any other documents that are related to the project is best to keep more than less. However, please note that this list is not exhaustive, and the auditors may request other additional documentation. Usually, when audit is about to take place, the auditors will send a list of documents that they would like to see when they actually come physically in the office. They will let you know before that what you should prepare. So now, like Ante already said, we are here to help you not only before the project starts, not only during the project preparation, but also during the project duration phase. We can organize one-to-one consultations. We can also review the proposal before it's being submitted, and as part of our daily business, we do send mail shots and we update our social media page. So please sign in and like our Facebook and Twitter page, Horizon 2020 Malta. As Ante also mentioned, we have the YouTube channel, Horizon Malta. We'll send you the links to those, and please do not forget to subscribe to our MCST website, because this is our main communication channel. And yes, our team, you probably already saw this slide. Ante is our director. Myself, I take care of MSCA, ERC, and FED. George is energy, transport, legal and financial issues, and Euratom. Mark is responsible for ICT, nanotechnologies, secure societies. Steve takes care of innovations in SMEs and access to risk finance, as well as space. Tamara, climate action, European changing world, and swaps. And Ian, who is our latest NCP, takes care of the health, food, agriculture, marine, and bioeconomy, as well as research infrastructures. So now, before we proceed to the Q&A session, we are going to launch a Kahoot exercise. My colleague George will share the screen so that you will see how to join this exercise. So please, George.
Hello. So let's see if this works. So, can you confirm you're seeing the screen, Lily?
Yes, we
Okay.
do see the screen.
So I have to ask everyone to take out their phones, or maybe if you're using two screens, to open Kahoot, which basically what you have to do is go on a browser. Any type of browser, I recommend Google Chrome from, let's say, your phone. Just type Kahoot, www.kahoot.it, which is listed up here, and put in the game pin, which is 219513. I'll give you a moment to join the Kahoot. So just go to www.kahoot.it, put in the game pin, and put in your nickname or your own name, whatever you prefer. I'm gonna give 1 more minute for everyone to join, and then we'll start. Okay, seems that we have most of the participants in the room in the Kahoot. So basically what we're gonna do is a small exercise, just to refresh your brain about the content of today. So all you need to do is look at the screen. There will be either a multiple choice question or a true or false question. So from your browser that you opened the game, you just have to click on the icon which represents the answer on the screen. So let's start. So first question is true or false. The EU funding payment is distributed to the partners, beneficiaries of the project by the project coordinator. True or false? So we have just one wrong answer. Just to clarify, all the payments from the EU go to the coordinator, then the coordinator distributes them to the project partners. Moving on, next question. True or false? Again, the start of project activities is self-financed. Again, the answer is false. The start of project activities is self-financed. Basically, what that means is you get a prepayment, so whatever you do at the start of the project is covered by your prepayment. So you do not go out of pocket to start the activities. Next question. What is deducted from the pre-finance payment? So the options are overheads, guarantee fund, tax, and then NI contributions or equipment costs. Time's up. So the guarantee fund is the only thing that is removed or basically retained by the European Commission when passing you the pre-finance payment. Next question. Payment of the balance consists of the retention and guarantee fund. Is this true or false? Great. Everyone has it correct. Moving on. The guarantee fund amounts to how much percentage? Is it 5, 3, 10, or 7%? So the correct answer was 5. The guarantee fund is always 5% of the prepayment amount. Interim payments are to be paid within 60 days of receipt of the report. So I see that most of you have put in an answer, and I knew that most of you would get this incorrect. So basically, interim payments are to be paid within 90 days, not 60 days of receipts of the report. So the Commission has 90 days to pass you the monies after you submit your report. So that's 90 days, not 60. 60 days is the time you have to submit your own reporting. Okay, I hope that's clear. If not, please ask us to clarify this in the question and answer part. Next question. Project reporting is done via the, is it the MCST website, emails to MCPs, reporting is not needed, or the funding and tenders portal? So just pick one of these. I think most of the participants have put in the answer. Yep, 12. Perfect. That is correct. The funding and tenders portal is where you have to submit all your reports. Moving on. So periodic reporting consists of reports. What type of reports? Are they operational and profits? Are they technical and financial? Or are they functional and analytic, or policy and credit reports? So they are technical and financial. So the others are just words that I made up, which was more difficult than actually writing up the solution. So we always submit technical and financial reports for European funding. Moving on. True or false? Each beneficiary needs to explain the use of resources, information on subcontracting and in-kind contributions. True or false? Very good. So each beneficiary is always responsible for his actions, so they need to submit and explain what resources they used and other information of how they use the resources. Next question. You must demonstrate best value in purchasing and subcontracting. Is this true or false? So most of you got it right. You always must demonstrate the best value in purchasing and subcontracting. Just to clarify this point, if you are issuing a tender and you go by the national rules, which currently are cheapest price, that is still considered best value because that's the practice you carry out in your entity. If there are any other rules that apply to tenders, they're still considered the best value approach because that is your normal and national approach. So let's continue with the next question. True or false? A project partner can subcontract to another project partner. True or false? Very fast answer. So, it is false. As Lily mentioned in her part of the presentation, a project partner cannot and must not subcontract to another project partner. If you identify a subcontractor to delegate the activity, it must not be your project partner. It's very important that you do not do this because the costs will not be eligible. Amendments to the grant agreement are always granted. Wow, that's fast responses there. So, if you ask for an amendment to your grant agreement, it is not always going to be granted to you. For example, let's say with the pandemic right now, your project was about to, let's say, finish in March, and you asked for an extension. It was not automatically guaranteed that you would get an extension. So it depends on the conditions of your grants, and it depends also on the Commission's perspective of why you're requesting the amendment. So again, the answer was false. An audit can be carried out up to how many years after the final payment? The options are 7, 5, 4, or 2. Very good. Most of you got it right. So an audit can be carried out up to 2 years after the final payment, and audits can be carried out at any point in time during the running of your project. So make sure you keep all documentation for 2 years after the conclusion of the project, and 2 years, up to 2 years after receiving the final payment. So the first level audit certificate on the financial statement is needed if requesting a total of 325,000 or more. True or false? So the answer is true. So it's only needed if you are requesting more than 325,000 euros. Otherwise, you do not need to submit it. So we're approaching the end. You can charge costs incurred before the start of the project. I hope that no one gets this incorrectly. Okay, so anything you do before the signature of the grant and the start of activities is not eligible. And if you report anything as eligible cost, it will not be approved. So only from the start of the activities that are described in your grant agreement. So last question, and I hope you get this one right, or otherwise I'll be very disappointed. National contact points are there to help. Great job. So yes, we're there to help. Our services are for free, and we offer tailor-made support to you, okay? Thank you for participating. So we'll move on to the next part of our webinar, which is the question and answer. So let's see if we have any questions. So there is a question. What is the guarantee fund? Can you give us more details? Do answer when necessary. Okay, so this is for Edward Duca. Basically, the guarantee fund is a small percentage of your pre-financing amount, which is 5%. The guarantee fund is 5%, and it's retained by the Commission as a kind of binding aspect of your grant agreement. I won't go into too much detail what it's used for, but basically, let's say if, as I mentioned in, yeah.
It is 5% of the whole grant, not of the pre-financing, just to clarify.
That's right. Thank you for clarifying that.
And if I may intervene, it is sort of like an insurance scheme for all the Horizon 2020 beneficiaries, which are participating in that project. That is to ascertain that in case there are any defaults in payment or a defaulting partner, this guarantee fund will make up for that defaulting part of the project. I don't know if it's clear enough.
Thank you for clarifying that, Antea. Just because you went into the detail of it, basically what happens is this goes into a big pot by all the projects that the Commission funds, and it's used very smartly, as Antea explained, to kind of reinvest the money and make sure that if there are any defaults, the money is there always to cover these dropouts or failures. I don't know if we have any more questions. If anyone has any question, you can open your microphone and come in and ask your question if you feel more comfortable instead of using the chat. So maybe I can ask actually the NCPs to come up with a question to ask one of the speakers. So it seems we do not have any questions. Antea and Lily, any last points before we close off?
No, but just as I mentioned earlier, that all these recordings are now accessible on the MTSC website, as well as our YouTube channel. So you can feel free to revert back to these recordings anytime you may wish. Or also just feel free to contact one of the national contact points. And thank you very much again for joining.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll stop here then. We look forward to seeing you back in our office whenever you need support. Bye and thank you.